Today we're talking with our Japan correspondent, Justin McCrory, who we can cross live to now. Hello, Justin. Firstly, it's at the forefront of international headlines, of course, but how are the Japanese press reporting on the Typhoon Haiyan?
Well, it's very much the same here. The typhoon has led the lunchtime TV news here in Tokyo, and the whole tragedy is featured very prominently in the newspapers over the weekend and today on Monday. Now, the latest news from Japan is that it has sent or is about to send a team of 25 doctors to the Philippines to assess the situation there, treat as many people as they can. Japan has held off on any big announcements of emergency aid. What it intends to do is send some diplomats to Manila. In fact, I believe that they're on their way to Manila now to discuss the situation with their counterparts in the Philippine capital and decide what sort of items are necessary on the ground. Now, there's also a small party of US Marines on their way from the southern Japanese island of Okinawa. The US Marines were instrumental, you might remember, 2 years and 8 months ago, in looking after people and providing emergency aid after Japan's northeast coast was hit not by a typhoon, but by that hugely destructive tsunami. And today is exactly 2 years, 8 months since that disaster. So the disaster in the Philippines has a certain poignancy, I think, for the Japanese, which may explain why TV and the press are giving it such great prominence. I mean, looking at the images coming in from cities like Tacloban, one of the hardest hit areas of the Philippines, you see people looking for their loved ones among the rubble. You see these houses washed away by the storm surge. You see fishing boats that have been washed inland. And so many of those images are very reminiscent of the scenes that we saw 2 years and 8 months ago on the northeast coast of Japan. So certainly a great deal of interest in the tragedy here. The media in Japan being a little bit more cautious than the media elsewhere. They're not using the 10,000 dead figure quite yet, although they do refer to it, but they're going with the confirmed number of deaths, and that remains relatively low at 255. So a bit of caution on the part of the Japanese media. That's perhaps, again, because back in 2011, after the tsunami, the original estimates of the number of people who died were actually far greater than the number of actual confirmed deaths. So a little bit of caution, but a great reminder, tragic reminder here in Japan of the power, destructive power of nature and Japan's own vulnerability to natural disasters.
Okay, well, as you mentioned there, the Fukushima nuclear disaster has been an issue that's long been in the headlines in Japan, of course, and after months of preparation, a high-risk operation is set to begin this week as engineers extract the first of thousands of fuel rods from the wrecked Reactor 4 building. This delicate task is a major step on the long road to making the site safe after a powerful earthquake in 2011 sparked the worst nuclear disaster of the 21st century. In a bid to allay fears over the risky procedure, a handful of foreign journalists were invited onto the site last week, including our correspondent, Justin McCrory. Him, Marie Linton and William Bression gave us this report.
Days before the removal of spent fuel from Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant was due to begin, foreign journalists were invited to view the preparations. Despite the risks, Tokyo Electric Power said it was confident it could remove the fuel rods without posing a danger to workers or to the wider region. This will be the first step in a decommissioning process that's expected to last at least 3 decades.
This isn't the first time we've done this. Workers often remove spent fuel from ordinary nuclear power plants. The equipment and method we'll be using aren't much different from those we use at other nuclear plants.
TEPCO recently released an animated film explaining how it plans to conduct the operation, which is expected to last more than a year. A specially built crane will be used to remove about 1,500 fuel assemblies, one by one. They'll then be placed in dry casks and transferred to a more secure storage pool nearby.
Storing it underwater shields any radiation from escaping, and keeping it here on the site avoids any need to transport it on roads or railways.
It's a huge challenge. The Unit 4 storage pool contains 264 tons of highly radioactive material. In March 2011, a hydrogen explosion ripped off the building's roof, exposing the spent fuel pool, located 100 feet above ground, to the elements.
The explosion sent debris into the air, and some of it landed in the Reactor 4 fuel pool. The original crane used to remove the fuel assemblies was damaged in the blast, so we had to build a new one. Those are the main differences between this
and fuel extraction from an undamaged reactor building.
Anti-nuclear activists protesting outside TEPCO's headquarters in Tokyo are concerned. They fear that a powerful earthquake, human error, or bits of uncleared debris could cause the fuel assemblies to collide, or worse, expose them to the air. That could spark an accident even worse than the one that the plant suffered in March 2011.
What if they drop the spent fuel? It would release massive amounts of radiation. This is an unprecedented operation, so it's hard to imagine what could happen. I think they should at least evacuate nearby residents beforehand.
TEPCO, which is already battling leaks of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean, is struggling to convince the public that it can handle this delicate operation alone. As a result, there are growing calls for international experts to be invited to supervise the removal of the fuel rods.
Okay, Justin, well, you could see some trepidation from people in that report about removing these fuel rods. Why are Japanese authorities deciding to do this now?
Well, the quickest answer is that despite the risks that we outlined in our film, this is probably the easiest part of the whole decommissioning process for TEPCO. It's done fuel removal many times before, although, of course, there are added complications. Now, we don't know exactly when it will start. We think it's going to be within the next 10 days, and it will take just over a year. But after that's completed, assuming that it's completed safely, TEPCO then has to move on to the melted fuel deep in the basements of 3 other reactors. Now, those reactors are still very highly radioactive. TEPCO has no idea exactly where the fuel is. So if anything, that's going to be a much bigger challenge than the fuel rod removal this month.
Okay, Justin McCrory in Japan, thanks very much for joining us for Age Alive here on France 24. All right, we're going to take a short break, but coming up, there's lots more in the next tranche from Live from Paris with my colleague Stuart Norville. He'll be crossing to Manila to get the latest on Typhoon Haiyan's devastation, so do stay tuned for that.